Has anybody here heard of the Second World War? Okay. And have you heard of I.G. Farben? Of course you have. And you know very well, probably better than I do, because Americans don't study this history unless they have to, that there was a man named Fritz Termeer who was the head of Bayer Pharmaceutical. We say Bayer. And he was tapped to become the head of I.G. Farben. Why the pharmaceutical industry was that important is the subject of another lecture, and I hope you'll ask me back, but now we're going to skip that part, except to remind you that properly used pharmaceuticals are the leading cause of death in the developed world. No accident. Fritz Termeer went to jail along with 26 other I.G. Farben executives following the Nuremberg War Tribunals. He and the others were in jail less than 4 years. He got out of jail, he got a new set of clothes, a haircut, a new pair of shoes, and went back to work as the head of Bayer. Now, the food must have been pretty terrible in prison because he had a sudden awareness while he was there. He must have said, oh my goodness, we didn't have to waste all that effort on the trains and the prison camps and the crematoria. All we needed was to control the food. Oh my! And so he called together the other people who had been in jail with him, who were pharmaceutical executives, now once again running the newly independent companies that had been broken out of I.G. Farben. And he said, boys, let's write a letter to the UN. And he said, let's propose that the United Nations take over the world food trade, hot dog, so to speak. And so that letter was written, and Fritz Termeer took that letter to the United Nations. 10 years later, which is no time at all in the world of bureaucracies, the United Nations creates Codex Alimentarius Commission, jointly run and funded by WHO and FAO. The next year, Codex begins its work. And nobody paid any attention. It was an activity of bureaucrats. It had no teeth. Nobody cared. Until 1994, when the World Trade Organization was created. And the World Trade Organization adopted Codex as presumptive evidence in settling food-related trade disputes. And now Codex has a stick, a big stick called trade sanctions. And suddenly, people are paying attention to Codex Alimentarius. And the United States announces that it will harmonize, and I, in English, can emphasize harm. Now, who pays attention? The bigs. First of all, the United States. The bigs start with big pharma, big chema, big agribiz, big biotech, and big medica. And whatever these 5 bigs want at Codex, the United States gives them, because the United States is the 5,000-pound gorilla at Codex, followed by its friend gorilla, the EU. And the rest of the gorilla band, the other industrialized nations. Codex Alimentarius, I've told you it's a UN commission, and it controls food, and this should scare you silly. It controls food from farm to fork. Codex is a lie. They claim to be science-based. They are not. They claim to be consensus-based, and I can tell you, as someone who sits in Codex meetings, consensus means whatever the chairman has predetermined with the United States and Big Pharma. Why would Big Pharma be interested in food? Very simple. Healthy people eat healthy food, and they're lousy customers. But sick people are eating sick food, and they're great customers. So if you meld together the pharmaceutical and medical industries that make money only when people are sick with genocidal intent, you have Codex. Supposedly it's voluntary. Countries don't have to go along with it.
Aber.
WTO uses Codex, as I told you, as a presumptive standards and can impose crippling trade sanctions, and fragile economies cannot tolerate those sanctions. So, what does Codex do? Who cares? Codex covers all food for humans and animals. Codex, in a nutshell, genocidal business math 101. Big Pharma generates more money than any other industry in the world. I told you, healthy food makes healthy people. Healthy customers, bad for business. Sick food, sick people. Good customers for Big Pharma. Okay? The best thing is sick people, as sick as long as possible, generating as many profits as possible, and then as dead as possible. That's pretty obvious. Now, in order for this to happen, the food must be as contaminated as people can tolerate, and all natural health options, non-pharmaceutical options, must be eliminated. And that is part of the war on you. If you can only take drugs, your bodies belong to the state. If you cannot take herbs, if you cannot take homeopathy, if you cannot choose other options, you are slaves and you are slated for extinction. Now, remember I told you that Codex was voluntary and that countries don't have to go along with Codex? With the exception of genetically modified food, the EU backs the US on everything it wants. I can tell you, as an environmental physician, which is one of my trainings, that the level of pesticides and contaminants, irradiation, and other ways to make food unwholesome, which Codex allows, will kill you and your children. That's what it's intended to do. Oh, she can't be correct. Surely she's exaggerating. We know that high-potency nutrients, such as we in the United States are permitted for the moment, are under severe attack here in Europe. I know as a physician using no drugs for almost 40 years of practice, no drugs, that without high-potency nutrients, I couldn't cure cancer, I couldn't cure the other degenerative diseases, and I couldn't reverse the damage done by the environment. And that's the whole point, isn't it? Now, the European Union has decided that high-potency nutrients are to be treated as toxins. On July 4th, 2005, General Stubblebine and I were present in the Codex Alimentarius Commission chamber while the vitamin and mineral guideline was ratified to the jubilation of the United States. According to the estimates of organizations like UNICEF, UNESCO, the World Health Organization, and the United States government, that one guideline will kill a minimum of 3.5 billion people. Billion people. No. Billion. How? Because that document, if subscribed to around the world, will guarantee undernutrition. The World Health Organization says correctly that the preventable epidemic diseases of undernutrition, non-communicable, are cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity. In my drug-free practice, I treat cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and many other diseases with nutrition. Cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, and obesity are the 5 major killers of the industrialized world. They are also the 5 principal money makers of the pharmaceutical and medical industry. Do you see the picture? Now, GMO. Anybody here in this room want genetically modified food? But you're getting it.
aber wir bekommen sie.
The animals that you are eating have been fed genetically modified food, unless they're organic or biologique. Then they're only fed a little bit of genetically modified food. In October, there was a secret meeting of 27 countries, every country in the EU. High-level people met together to decide how to overcome your resistance to genetically modified food and force you to eat it. Is that okay with you? Probably not. It's not okay with me. Okay. Codex does lots and lots of bad things. In fact, having read an enormous number of Codex guidelines and standards and having sat through many meetings, I can tell you that I know of not one thing that Codex has ever done that's good for you, the planet, or your children. Now, one of the things that Codex does is it gags people like me from telling people like you